mind is still stuck on it, and trying to see if that's even possible. There's an escalation here with Bryan Kohberger, and so far I don't see it, except for the addiction. There's the only thing, is the mental health issue.
Yeah.
But there's so many people with that problem in America that it's like a dime a dozen.
It's not great evidence.
No.
Yeah.
It's not. So I want to know what you guys think. I want to know if you have any opinions on this. If you think there's anything in Bryan Kohberger's background that could be good supporting evidence towards him being a serial killer, or anything that you see within this crime that sticks out to you that could be used to analyze what kind of killer could have committed this crime. Idaho 4 murders. Let me know.
Yes. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Why do I feel like this camera is just getting further and further over? It's really weird. The sign is still messed up.
Yeah,
Brendan.
The next time I'm in the studio.
Brendan is not here to fix all the problems. What's happening here? Everything looks crooked.
Yep, I'm the builder. I can literally build anything. I don't think I don't think there's ever been a situation where I couldn't build something.
Yeah, you're pretty good with your hands for sure.
Maybe if it was in like the 1800s or something where I didn't have access to Google, when I run into parts that are like not obvious and logical, then maybe I would be in trouble. But
I think I should turn the camera just a tiny bit.
No, it looks good. It's only off just barely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just gonna try to barely tweak it my way, because when we share anything, it's cutting me off.
It's not worth it.
Okay.
Yeah, that camera mount is not meant to be moved. It's a semi-permanent mount.
Okay, well, I'll just scoot over a little, so hopefully I don't get cut off.
But yeah, so interesting stuff. Welcome everybody to the True Crime Talk Show, brought to you by Thought Riot Podcast. We are going to follow up on what we were talking about what we were talking about in the video in the premiere, which was, it started off as using the evidence of peeping toms and how many serial enders start their career escalation and progression through being a peeping tom. But we ended up talking about a lot more than that, because it involves a little bit of everything. I think more the topic that was covered was the overall behavioral progression and reliability around that escalation and progression. And if we can identify some of those things in Bryan Kohberger and what they are, and some of the differences in the things between what we hear is going on and what we have actual evidence for that is going on. And I'll just make the statement right off the bat here that, at Thought Riot Podcast, we're not trying to prove Bryan Kohberger's innocent or guilty. That's not even our main focus. That's the end result from an investigation into the investigation and case of Bryan Kohberger. His innocence isn't important at this stage. His guilt isn't important at this stage. That the importance of innocence or guilt is going to lean on the shoulders of the jury members. But how reliable is that information that the jury members are actually going to be getting? And in my opinion, that is the butter for my bread. You know what I mean? That's the important part here is, are we going to see a reliable outcome from the jury members who are here to determine Bryan Kohberger's innocence and guilt based on the information that's going to be offered up to them?
Yeah, and I think that the psychological analysis of killers and really anybody is really intriguing. But my point, some of the things I was thinking about when I was researching peeping toms, types of serial killers, and thinking about that and thinking Bryan Kohberger's does seem very atypical. He doesn't seem like, now clearly based off his writings, he had some kind of trauma somewhat, but it almost makes you beg the question, like, what amount of trauma, what mixture does it take of like biology, nature versus nurture to create a serial killer? And so far from what I see in Bryan Kohberger's past, which honestly we don't have that much. Like, we know he was bullied, which obviously is very traumatic. He was overweight, lost that weight, became more confident. People say he became kind of a jerk, but we don't know for sure. People say he became kind of a misogynist, but then it's like it's all conflicting. It's all speculation. We don't have anything real solid other than like a couple of his friends, and nothing they had to say seemed that alarming to me. And, I think questions like, what's his relationship with his mother? What's his relationship with his father? Like, family members, that's important. But I feel like with the current amount of knowledge we have of Bryan Kohberger right now as the public, anybody who is analyzing his behavior and trying to put him in one of these categories, trying to make him out to be like a serial killer, it's disingenuous. I don't feel like it's fair. It's entirely speculative. There is no science to that. There is nothing backing any of it, because
Well,
most of what we have about him is speculation and anonymous tips. And I feel like you can't really make a solid assessment on that. If you are trying to, it's all armchair psychology. And I would just wanted to point out the things I would be looking for. And I think that criminal profilers and, people who study this, criminologists, would be looking for is things like, was he a peeping Tom? Like, what was going on in his childhood? What got him to that point?
yeah, I just want to be fair when we're talking about something like that, because I'm somebody who doesn't believe any topic is off limits. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. I don't care how shocking somebody says the topic is. Topics aren't ever the problem. What is the problem is tonality, aggression,
The
respect,
presentation. Yeah.
and yeah, how it's presented. So I don't see a problem with people drawing a connection that Bryan Kohberger could be a serial killer. I don't see a problem with people drawing a connection that he could be a mass murderer. Where I draw the issue with, because he is arrested for a crime that suggests he could be one of those things, my issue is the evidence being used to support that. I think that the idea of that concept isn't wrong as much as the subjective hearsay type evidence being presented as objective facts, that, this person said this about him. This is true, you know?
Yeah, like him, intentionally setting this girl up to get, like, breaking and entering into her home to get her to ask for security cameras and then installing them so he can spy on her. Like, that's
Yeah.
entirely speculative, but it's stated like objective fact. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's the character assassination we've seen of him. And to make an analysis on tips like that are entirely speculative, and people leapt with what that woman said, They just took it and ran with it. It's not fair, in my opinion, and it is character assassination. But I agree with you. No topic is off limits. But like the woman who said he was a cannibal, that was disingenuous to me.
I mean, absolutely it is. And that's why that's why I tease her all the time is not because the statement, because here's the thing, like I said in the video, okay, let's say she came on there and she was like, look, I think that Bryan Kohberger has these dangerous desires, and I believe that he could be struggling with cannibalism because of these things. Now, in my experience, and in my hypotheses and research that I've done, I've shown that out of the 100 people that I tested in this way, I drew these conclusions. The character traits that I'm seeing in those people who came to this conclusion match Bryan Kohberger in this way. The problem is we're not seeing anything like that. Literally no evidence whatsoever. It's you're listening, and my title says expert because somebody somewhere said I'm an expert, so you need to believe what I say with no evidence. That is absolutely insane. It's that same concept around police officers right now, where just because they have a badge, they deserve to be believed. What?
Right.
Madness. That's insane. What do you mean? A badge doesn't make you a different person. It doesn't make you more trustworthy. It doesn't make you more reliable. If anything, it means that you need more accountability and your work product needs to be judged more because you have multiple lives on the line under that badge, not just you.
Yeah, I agree with you. But surrounding the jury, you brought up the jury earlier. One thing that, and I like Bob Mata a lot. I think he's really cool. I appreciate all of his input, his expert takes on things, being a lawyer and knowing things about the law. His Delphi coverage is incredible. But one thing he kept bringing up, which it started making me think about the Idaho 4 case, but he was talking about Delphi and Richard Allen, and he said they were talking about the bullet, the magical bullet, and how, the it just being there, even if the science is entirely bunk, is a problem for Richard Allen. And you could have an expert go up there and, say this is why it works, and it means he was there. Then you have one go up there and seemingly prove that it's entirely bunk, that it's the science is not there. You cannot you can't just prove that this came from that gun.
I mean,
undeniably, so he
you
said,
kind
but
of can. It's going to lean on the attorneys. So yeah, from an attorney's perspective, sure, you could discredit any expert by giving contradicting evidence. But I mean, as long as you have science data backing your statement, I mean, most jury members should be able to see that 1 + 1 = 2.
well, yeah, I mean, sure. If you have data backing it, like if you have data versus an expert with just an opinion, like that matters. But he was saying that jurors don't care about the science,
Right.
that it's all just
That I
jargon.
believe.
It's all jargon to them. They don't care. So that being there, like they'll hear both experts and they won't know what to do with any of that information. And it's just it's like blah, 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 blah. It's just words. And that bullet being there, well, the bullet was there and they said that it matches his gun. So that's a major problem for him, regardless of how, you know, I can't think of the word right now. I'm blanking on the word, but just how not good the science is on that type of ballistics, how, it's a problem.
Like
The fact that it was completely,
unreliable, the
yeah,
data.
there you go. It's a super unreliable because it didn't actually go through the chamber. The bullet was never fired.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, I still think there are ways to back that information up. I really, really do. I think that You could give percentages of likelihood based on an overall number of tests and what those tests concluded to and what the percentage of match is versus the reality of the match, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but that
Oh,
I didn't
man.
you know, I guess for all of us who care about true crime, we can sit here and think, wait, why do jurors not care about the science? I care about the science. I want to understand what's going on here. It matters to me. Well, I mean, we're only a part of the population. How many true crime junkies are going to get picked for the jury? Probably none, if they're honest, because they don't want true crime junkies in the jury. They want people who don't pay attention to cases. They want people that don't know anything about the science behind these
I mean,
things.
not always. I think
Yes, they
that
do.
I mean, no, not
They
always.
don't want
If
people
you
who
have a
know anything
defendant
about the case.
if if you have a defendant who is innocent, right, and they believe wholeheartedly that they are innocent, a fact-driven jury member would be a benefit in those situations. That's the difference in argument between somebody who is more logic and objective heavy versus somebody who's more emotion and subjective heavy. And if you guys haven't watched our video on objectivity and subjectivity, one is not better than the other. Let me be very, 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 very clear, because it is an issue in the true crime community where people think like, oh, heaven is objectivity and logic, when that's just not true. The one never comes without the other. It's impossible. They are always connected. It just depends on how heavy you are in one or the other. Now, if you happen to be more heavy in subjectivity and emotion, drawing connection between emotions, there's actually a lot of benefit in that by angling your approach and making connections where somebody who's objective and falls into logical fallacies won't be able to draw connections. So I just think that there's a heavy, heavy, heavy benefit in understanding where you lean in the way that you think and perceive data and information based on these cases, and how you can be more, I don't know, level in any given situation, you know?
Yeah, sure. I'm curious what the jury questionnaire is going to be for the Idaho 4 case. Like, really, really curious.
I am too. We
So,
just got a big boost in our search stats. So like when you search us on
mhm.
when you search us on Google, what are the other big ones? Yahoo, being any of those. They are now pulling up all of our new videos too, which is incredible. So I think that's from last week when we were having issues with people flagging our content. But every single one of our videos is populating on Google now. So if anyone types in anything even close to Thought Riot, all of our newest videos pop up. It's super awesome. Anyways, I was just checking on Google and I realized that it finally went into effect.
That's
But
good. That's great.
it is good. No, it's super good. And I actually, so because we dealt with so much of that stuff last week, our content and videos are popping up in like searches. So like if you search thought, I was even doing some like searches. I won't explain how. But I was doing like searches and we were popping up all over the place. I was super stoked by it. So, yeah, super cool. But
Yeah, it is.
going back to what we were talking about with the case, yeah, I think it's an interesting question looking at it from the jury's perspective. And I saw a couple people saying here in the chat that, juries can be scary. Absolutely, they can be. And what's even scarier
Yes.
is the amount of control that the prosecution and the defense has based on picking jury members.
Yep.
I know that keeps it fair. I get it. Like I understand it. I just feel like there could be a better way right? Because, and one of my issues with the cases right now, especially in Idaho, is there is so much control that the prosecution has, like bypassing, the initial pre-crime trial, whatever, the pre-case trial or whatever, by doing a grand jury, then having the overall selection of the jury members, then being able to keep out certain evidence that could point to somebody else because it doesn't prove Bryan Kohberger was, like, it's just a lot of power. And I don't think that was originally written in our laws for our justice system, but it has since evolved into that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I mean, the grand jury is just something that is I'm really interested in how this is gonna turn out with them doing the interlocutory appeal, and tomorrow is the hearing. There's gonna be, the sealed one and then the public one. And Brian Itten just did an interview with or like a podcast with one of their legal specialists that do things for News Nation. And some of the things she was saying I found really interesting, and I didn't think about it in that way. So she was basically saying, like, they want, because we have the PCA, okay? We have the prosecutions and the state, like the state side of this case. With that motion that they want unsealed, they are trying to get out their side. Like, look at all of these problems. Look at all of this. This is look at it from our side and all of our issues and questions. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's a great point, and that makes total sense because they are alleging prosecutorial misconduct. They're alleging withholding exculpatory evidence and many other things. So it makes you think, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They want their side of the case out there, showing the issues, and that's his right to do that. So
Yeah,
now I feel like I understand better why they wanted those unsealed. And, Brian Nitton said, well, why would they do that? Why they want to taint the jury pool? And I just thought, oh my
exactly.
gosh.
I knew that was gonna
Oh
be the
my
main
gosh.
running story. I
Dude,
knew it. When
it's
standard is unsealed, like, those
well,
are the rights.
you're right. But also, we only have the state side. The jury pool is tainted if you're only hearing one side of the story.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and that's never gonna be an argument that's gonna get proved, though. That's why I haven't brought that up, is like, look, we know the character assassination has been real. You're never gonna be able to prove that it came from the prosecution, but if the prosecution I
Hmm?
if if the prosecution is a lawyer that, if they're worth anything, right? They're the ones who controlled the character assassination. It happens all the time. I mean, we live in a technological era and trials start in the media. I don't care. Anybody who tries to say that they don't, they're just dated, okay? They're a dated person in the perception of what our justice system is. And that's why everything should be on camera nowadays. There's no way to keep those things out of, you know, social media, online, and everything like that. But what, with the character assassination, you'll never be able to prove that it came from prosecutors. You'll never be able to prove that, one side had somebody call into a news station and not give a name or any information and say, hey, Bryan Kohberger did this, but they were the ones who did it, clearly, 100% guaranteed. I mean, it's super obvious. They're the only ones that have anything to gain in this situation. You might get one-offs where random people are doing it just because, they want some kind of minimal fame. I don't know. But there's never going to be the defense is never going to have the opportunity to level the playing ground in that.
I
Whoever
understand.
starts it first, it pretty much wins when it comes to the trial by media.
I understand what you're saying there. I wasn't even getting on that topic of the character assassination. I was just talking about the PCA, the theory of the case that is supposedly supposed to be factual. So I mean, having their side of those facts, facts, subjective facts, is important. I think, and I don't feel like it taints the jury pool, and I don't feel like that's the intention. It's to make it balanced. That's how the grand jury should be. That's why I don't agree with the grand jury, is because it's not balanced. They're not hearing both sides of it. The prosecutor's evidence, the state's evidence, is not being challenged at all.
Well,
Except for it's supposed to be challenged by those grand jurors, but they asked for more evidence and were denied. So, I mean, how much did they actually get to challenge that evidence? Probably not at all, like most grand juries.
I
And I saw Heather saying that Anne dropped the prosecutorial misconduct accusation a while back. I wonder if that was a way to try to get it unsealed, or like, I don't know. I'm curious if that's a tactic. Maybe it could help push along that appeal better, and dropping the indictment, like maybe it benefits in some way to drop that, even if it were true.
I just want to be careful talking about like them asking for this to be unsealed by trying to make it fair, when that is one of those logical fallacies, because we're starting standard from the unstandard area. Standard is this information is unsealed, and why it's standard is because it is the defendant's amendment rights, their basic human rights for being a U.S. citizen, is that this part of the case is unsealed. The only reason it would be sealed is if they went out of their way to request that it was sealed, which Ann Taylor says in the document that they went ahead and sealed this document at the behest of the prosecution. The logical fallacy in the mainstream media is that they're changing it to be unsealed. Therefore, standard now is the sealed motion, and it's not. So it doesn't matter why they want to change it.
Yeah.
They don't even need to have a reason. It doesn't even have to benefit them. They could just be expecting the case to get back to a standard operating procedure, and that standard operating procedure at level 0, because right now it's, down here, is that case being unsealed.
I get what you're saying, but I don't know. I feel like they are sealing and wanting things unsealed, and they're using it to their advantage, not just because he has the right to a public trial, but because there's an advantage there, and I think they should be able to do that. I just don't agree with the lack of transparency overall. And I get it doesn't matter. It's his right, no matter what. It
There
shouldn't
doesn't
matter.
have to be a reason at all, and that's where
But
that
but there is.
fallacy is coming in. There doesn't have to be. By assigning a reason, we're saying that, the new standard is that it's sealed. So there needs to be a reason why they're unsealing it. When maybe there is, I don't know, but there doesn't need to be, because standard is unsealed. Standard is the public trial. Standard is Bryan having full 100% control in this, because he is the defendant, and these are amendment human rights within the U.S.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of lost with what you're saying a little bit.
Just so I'm continuing the conversation of what we were talking about the other night, where we were
I
talking
know.
about the possible implications of them changing this from sealed to unsealed. The more I chewed on it, the more I realized that while we were trying to draw connections and make conclusions about the implications of that being unsealed, there doesn't have to be any. All they're asking is to get back to standard, right? So let's just look at it like we're plotting this on a graph or something. Like a public trial in this documentation would be at 0. Asking them to seal it makes them go under what standard would be if standard operating was at that zero baseline. They're only asking for the case to get back to standard, regardless of if there's a reason behind it or not. I just think that it's being manipulated and twisted by making it seem like the defense has to have a reason. What is that reason that they're bringing it back to being unsealed? And I think that's a flawed way of looking at it, when maybe they have a reason, but they don't need one, and it doesn't matter
Yeah,
because
you're
that's
right.
standard.
You're right. They don't need one, and it doesn't matter, but I feel like that's impractical because I think that they're playing chess, okay? Like they have a reason for everything. Everything's intentional for the most part. If they want something sealed, they have a very good reason. If they don't want it sealed, they
Well,
have a good
the
reason.
prosecution asked for it.
Because we're not talking about a normal case, we're talking about Idaho for a case,
I
and this is a case that's been, it's been gagged, everything gets sealed for the most
Yeah,
part
but
now,
this
so
was sealed at the request of the prosecution. Therefore,
right.
they didn't necessarily seal it
They didn't
for
want
their
it
own
sealed.
benefit.
Yeah.
So I don't think that unsealing it needs to have a reason to unseal it other than just wanting it to be a standard operating
Yeah.
procedure.
But you're right, but at the same time, I do think there's a benefit there, or else they wouldn't even care to fight for it. It wouldn't matter to them unless there was a benefit for their client,
I
and
I hope
I
so.
I would also beg the question, what's wrong with that? Like, there's nothing wrong with them unsealing something for their own benefit, and people kinda started running with it and saying, "Well, that means he wants the whole case to stop being so, you know, stop everything to stop being sealed. He wants it open. He wants it public." And I don't feel like that's what was said in that motion. That wasn't the point of it, in my opinion. But I mean, it's to be determined. We're not going to know until we see them argue this out in court. We're not going to know unless they continue to want to open things up, to ask for things to be opened up. If this is a one time thing, then it was meant to be a one time thing. They weren't asking for the whole case to be open and public.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at it, it's just there might not be a reason. I understand that there's this idea that there is probably a reason for it. And I even argued the other night that there is definitely a reason for it. But if they want to take things back to standard, there might not be a reason. Because unless Ann Taylor's lying, in her document, it says very cautiously they agreed to seal this document.
Yeah, it did say an abundance of caution. That makes me very, very curious for sure. Like, why? I don't understand why they sealed it. I don't know. I'm curious what the prosecutor said to make them be like, "Oh yeah, sure. We want to be careful. We will seal that. Don't worry about it."
Well, they were
I'm
doing a
curious.
favor. It's not we wanna be careful. It's not the prosecution was making decisions on their behalf. It was like we talked about in that video with the defense, that Natalie lawyer chick, which shout out to her, she's amazing. But she said that it is very, 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 very common in pretrial for the prosecution to still have an active investigation going and ask the defense to, hey, because of these reasons, which you would want to honor in good faith, right? Take the good faith approach until you have a reason not to, and them say, we would like to have this sealed because of our active investigation, because of this, because of that, because of this. And as long as it doesn't put them at a disadvantage, and I think that's the important part, is standard doesn't mean they're at a disadvantage, but it also doesn't mean they need to be getting an advantage from this. I think that they made the decision to seal it because it didn't put them at a disadvantage. It didn't necessarily put them at an advantage, nor does it need to put them in an advantage point, but it didn't put them in a disadvantage.
Maybe.
And in a situation like that, then there's no reason to not agree to it, because you now have, like, I did you that favor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
So
you
I
get to present it as such in the court too. If it ever comes in court, you get to use that as ammo and say, you know what, you can't say that we're acting in bad faith. I agreed to seal something in an abundance of caution when we didn't want it sealed because you asked me to. And you're saying I'm acting in bad faith? Like, come on, that's also ammo simultaneously.
Sure, it is. It definitely is. But another thing that was argued by that lawyer on Brian Itten's podcast, she said that they're most likely because they are bringing this argument back and asking the judge to reconsider, and they got the grand jury transcripts, right? They received those since then. So they probably found something new and they have new information that they're
But they
going
aren't
to be.
asking the judge to reconsider. I thought they were requesting it be sent
They
to
are,
Supreme
they,
Court because
they
they've
are,
already asked the judge to
they,
reconsider twice.
he has not ruled on their request to reconsider
The second time?
the dismissal of the indictment. He is not judged on that. He
So
made
the
his
second
initial
time?
ruling of saying no, and they are asking him to reconsider. And if he denies it, then they are doing the interlocutory appeal, and they are trying to take it up to the Supreme Court. Yes, but they are asking him to reconsider first,
Yeah, I think
so they can take
but
this
they've
back to
already
the
asked him to
preliminary hearing.
reconsider.
Yeah, what's your point? He has not ruled ever on a motion to reconsider.
Okay, I'll have to triple check that because I'm pretty sure that in the video we talked about, he gave the official ruling, right? Which all that
Yeah.
is not his opinion. It's just the grand jury's information and conclusion. And then they submitted something asking the judge to reconsider this or asking him to throw it out because of these things. And then they submitted another document asking him to reconsider that choice, and that's what we're pending on, right?
No, no, that's not correct. That official ruling that he put out there was super delayed. He told them no in court and was like, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to overturn the indictment." And then he said he would give his written ruling later on, which is what he did, and they are now asking him to reconsider that decision. They have
Right.
This hasn't happened multiple times, no.
Right. Okay.
And they want that information that they, the reasons that they want it overturned, and they don't think that they want it to go back to preliminary hearing. All those reasons is what they're wanting unsealed. It has nothing to do with the
Got it.
IGG. And maybe the IGG or something in the jury transcripts, I can't talk, transcripts, maybe that is additional evidence that they will be bringing up, that they're going to be arguing tomorrow, which half of it's sealed. We don't know what they're going to be arguing, but I think that it's very possible what she said is true, that they found more, and they're asking him to reconsider because they have even more evidence that they're going to be presenting and arguing and being like, hey, we want this overturned and we want you to reconsider considering this new evidence and things that we found.
Maybe, but they also have to ask him to reconsider in order to move it up the chain also. So I think it could be either one. It could just be a standard to get to the next level, or maybe they did find more. I have no idea. I have no idea. So this is probably one area of the investigation that has given the least amount of information coming out. The only thing really that we know about it is that potentially some of the grand jury members asked for more information. We don't have confirmation of that. We know that potentially the entire grand jury argument was shouldered on the backs of hearsay and an eyewitness testimony. And that's it, really. That's it. Unless I'm missing something, but I'm pretty sure that's all we have right now.
Yeah, I don't know. There's stuff I need to go back and look and check, and I don't I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll talk to you guys for a minute while he goes to the bathroom. Thank you, Heather, for sending the link to that order. I didn't remember this at all. And who's this signed by? John C. Judge. Bias grand jury. So he filed that motion on September 14th. The state filed an objection to defendant's second motion to dismiss indictment. Reply to the objection. A hearing on the motion was held October 26th. Okay. The hearing was closed. To protect the secrecy of the grand jury proceedings, the decision will also be sealed. However, the results of that decision are addressed in this public order for the public's benefit. He failed to successfully challenge the indictment on grounds of jury bias, lack of sufficient admissible evidence, prosecutorial misconduct. Kohberger was indicted by an impartial grand jury who had sufficient admissible evidence to find probable cause to believe Kohberger committed the crimes alleged by the state. Further, the state did not engage in prosecutorial misconduct in presenting their case to the jury. How does that drop the prosecutorial misconduct? This is a statement by the judge. So he's saying they failed to prove any of this. But that's according to his decision, an opinion of what they presented. This is his ruling. I don't see it saying that Anne is no longer going to argue prosecutorial misconduct. It doesn't say that to me. That's not how it reads to me. But I don't know. Thank you, CH. I appreciate that. I hurriedly just got myself put together. So that's nice.
All right. So going, new member. Awesome.
Hey, Sweet and Salty.
Yeah.
What a fun name.
Welcome. Super stoked to have you here. Going into the video that we were talking about, so going back to some more of the behavioral traits. Now, one thing that was interesting that I mentally bookmarked that I wanted to bring up was we had a couple members that on a couple different occasions mentioned that the evolution, somebody's crimes escalating and evolving, from yay, Bon member for 3 months.
Yes,
You
we appreciate
are
you.
awesome.
Yes, you're amazing, Bonnie.
Absolutely. Always appreciate your input.
Yes, very intelligent.
So like the bookmark that I was that I mentally bookmarked. So going back to Bryan Kohberger and the possibility of him being a mass murderer or a serial killer. Now, one thing at least that I like to do mentally just to kind of keep things in order when I'm thinking about it is look at the case on a micro level, right? So ignore any of the other escalation and evolution of behavioral traits or trouble or anything like that, and only look at this one crime, right? And what's important when you're only looking at this one crime is that it doesn't matter if we're looking at somebody who did this that is a serial killer. It doesn't matter if we're looking at somebody who did this that's a mass murder, a one-time mass murder. When you look at the escalation of these two types of people, almost always, there is a very clear, linear, measurable progression and escalation in their behavior, in their risky behavior and risk factors and trouble and taking advantage of people, the power play, the non-consenting type behavior like a peeping Tom, stuff like that. So when you're looking at just this case, regardless, it doesn't matter whether it's a mass or a serial, you would think that you would still be able to find some kind of measurable escalation.
Yeah, I agree with you. And by the way, take your phone off the table because it's when it vibrates, everybody can hear it. Like when your phone alerts, it goes
Oh,
right into the mic.
oh,
But anyway, I agree with you. I think that, well, I guess it kind of depends. I don't know. So let me ask this question, I guess, because I don't know if I entirely agree, actually, thinking about it a little bit more. So say you have a situation like the Napa murders. You remember that case?
um,
Adrian Mazzaro and Leslie.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Get a Clues talked about that case before, and we actually covered it, but though I don't know if it's posted as a clip or not yet. It's on a full-length podcast, I think, already posted, but I don't know if we posted the clip. Anyway, that case, it was 3 women in a home. 2 of them were upstairs in bed. One was downstairs, and she was a survivor. And it was a boyfriend of one of their friends that was jealous because his girl was leaving him because he was an alcoholic and not a great guy, and was going to go like vacationing with one of those girls. It was Adrian, and they were going to go climb a mountain together. And he felt like Adrian was taking his girlfriend away from him and he was losing her. And so he killed them. He went in there and he stabbed them, and there was a survivor who like ran outside and then hid outside, and then he left and she went up to check on them, and then she ran outside and called 911 on the phone in her car because she was terrified. She didn't know where he was.
So
Um,
you're looking
that
at it as a crime of
so
passion because that
so
would be classified as a crime of passion.
thinking about
There's a
something.
very close connection, so it's a little bit of a different
Well, because
crime unless
you said it doesn't matter if we're looking at a
between
serial.
those two
What? Okay, serial killer and what?
or a mass murder. And what makes those different is there is no personal connecting factors.
Okay, so how are mass murders are usually people who run up in a place with a gun. So like how
I
could
mean,
the
a mass murder is normally a murder at random in a factor of 3 or more. It doesn't have to be a gun. It
so
just has to be 3 or more random victims.
hey AR, good to see you. Hope you had a good day. Um I don't know that I'm not sure why you're distinguishing the difference between those two in this crime.
Because it matters when you're looking at crime stats. So there, when you have somebody that's close to you, they have that has its own classification of its own. They call it a familial homicide, and if there is involvement, like if there's a murder and somebody is in a family home or has tight family bonds, most of the time it is a familial murder. Like I forget what the percentage was, we went over it in one of our videos, but over 50% of the time it is somebody that is within that close family bond. Now we're being told that it isn't that in this case. So the behavioral traits, the patterns, the character traits in this situation will be looked at from a mass murder or serial killer perspective because there was no connection there. There was no personal connection there. That's what makes this so much less likely is when you're defining a murderer's behavioral background, like a profile, right? These factors are very big determining factors into what you would expect the killer to do and how they did it. So I think it's important in this case. I think it's really important, and it makes it different than the example that you're talking about because there was an emotional buy-in and connection there.
Okay, so we're not talking passion of crime here, okay? But when you're talking about a mass murderer, I just don't understand. Usually mass murderers aren't accused of going in a house, a residential house, and killing people in there.
Yeah, they can. The classification is no personal connection and 3 or more. Weapon
Yeah,
doesn't matter. It could be bare hands, it could be knife, it could be gun. What's important is that it is no personal connection and the count. The count has changed a whole bunch of time. Really, it's just a large number of people with no personal connection. Same thing with serial. Serial has no personal connection. It is all it's all selfish,
yeah, but
power
what's the
control.
difference in the mentality?
Oh, huge difference. So when it's familial and there's an emotional connection, you do not have to have risk factor ramp up
Yeah,
or
but we're not talking about
escalation in behavior.
familial.
We are. You're using that as an example. So we are using that. So if you're using that as an example, then you do not have to see escalation or
Right.
the evolution of behaviors. But in that case, it has to be somebody that's close to them. Otherwise, that example is outside of anything that would be considered standard. But when you're looking at a mass murder or a serial killer, there are certain behavioral traits that prove, like I said, the linear fashion of escalation, whether it's risky behavior and that's arrest, that's drug use, that's sex-based addiction, that is peeping tom, that is breaking and entering, stealing. Normally we see an escalation to taking someone's life.
Yeah,
And
no, for
that's what's
sure.
interesting when looking at Bryan Kohberger. So that's why I was just concerned with the example that you were giving, because you were using a familial murder, somebody that has a connection and an emotional bond to the victims, which would give them a reason to commit that crime. Whereas the Idaho 4, we're being told, does not.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest problems with the case is I think there's a possibility there for there to be to be inner circle, for it to be somebody who had a motive because of a close connection. I think that potential is there. And I feel like it wasn't. I mean, we don't know. I hope I'm proved wrong during the trial that they checked all of that very well, and it everybody was actually cleared. Um, but yeah, so with the escalation, I found it super interesting, the evolution of a peeping Tom, how they become a peeping Tom, and then how being that escalates into becoming somebody who would commit a crime like the Idaho 4. It's really interesting how they could start out like, and I used Danny Rolling as the example. Like he was, going to families' homes and staring in the windows because he had a really horrible home life, and just dreaming as a very small child, dreaming that was his family, seeing what like an actually like healthy, normal, because there's no such thing as normal family is, and daydreaming about that, wishing he had that. And then
Yeah.
as he entered puberty, he began to fixate on specific women, and it became something totally different, and you know uh, more sexual. And then breaking into homes, how it turns into like, because I never thought about the fact that, because when you think about a serial killer, like a sociopath, a psychopath, somebody who would, do something like that, you don't think about them being nervous. and feeling uncomfortable breaking into somebody's house. You don't
I
think about
mean,
that.
I
I
I
mean,
think so. That's what the escalation, that's why you see escalation.
yeah, that's what I was saying in the video is that they have to get comfortable crossing that boundary, going into somebody's house, because in the beginning, they're human, like, they're
Well,
uncomfortable breaking into
I don't
somebody's
think they're
house.
right. I don't know if they feel the same kind of fear,
Well, it's
and
excitement, but it's also uncomfortable because they don't know what to expect, they've never done it before.
well, yeah, I think based on what I've read, they're uncomfortable because they aren't in a position of power. And when they're entering a new situation and they're out of control, that's one area that, somebody that gets off on the overwhelming amount of control in any situation, it's going to make them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And how that slowly escalates, and that, it's kind of similar to like the somnophilia that we talked about a long time ago, like people watching people sleep, and how it becomes this, they feel some kind of power or control over the people. It's also like a thrill because, it's like not getting caught, but being so close, like you could get caught any moment, and all of those things. And, who knows? Some people do that and never become killers, which is really strange. Some people just do that. Like that's their thing and they just do it and they never go to that next step of actually hurting somebody. But it's interesting how many
Like physical
killers.
harm because they
Right.
are hurting
No,
somebody.
they
It's just
are
not
hurting.
physical. Yeah.
Right. They're doing something unconsensual that is absolutely horrible and is hurting somebody. But um physical harm, actually attacking somebody. It's interesting like how, like what breaks that boundary for some and not others.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question,
Yeah.
but I would expect like with the type of crime that Brian is being accused of, it makes me wonder about those things because this is a house full of women. And every assessment I've seen done of his behavior is that he has to hate women. He has to have something against women. And that's the only type of man that would do something like this is somebody who doesn't like women, who has something against them. And it also being like sexual in some way. And looking at other killers, preceding him, it almost all of them were peeping toms.
Yeah.
Almost all of them
Yeah.
did this pattern of escalation, and
Yeah.
we don't see it in Brian unless it's just not been revealed yet.
Like 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 95% type amount of
It's a lot.
killers see this escalation and progression. That's why it's so weird. And what's interesting is like, look, I've tried to create a profile on Brian a whole bunch of times, just thinking of anything that I could come up with. So if I'm trying to look at him as being guilty, I've thought of, is there some kind of hidden trauma between him and his mom? Well, that doesn't necessarily make sense because I don't see how any of those girls would fit his traumatic image of his mother in that situation to target them to start, right? Then I thought, well, maybe when he was growing up, his sisters got all the attention, and that caused some kind of deep seated trauma of a nature versus nurture, where he had enough nature sociopathic tendencies that all it took was a little bit of the lack of nurture to create somebody who could do this. And maybe two sisters that were always on honor roll, whatever, could cause something like that. So maybe, the stalking and power and killing could be related to something like that. That one, I don't know. I just don't see it very likely because, and regardless of if any of those seem like they could be possible or realistic, his level of escalation happened very quickly, very, 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 very quickly. And I look,
Yes.
one gap I see, and if you're a true crime creator and you're watching us, that this isn't an attack on anybody, literally nobody out there. But I personally haven't seen one single creator talk about dope that knew what they were talking about.
Right. I
Uh,
know.
like, okay, I'm gonna say that different, because like AR knows what he's talking about when it comes to the management of, like, the dealer, the manufacturer, the
Right.
bigger industry, right?
Right.
Very clearly, obviously,
He
like when he's
does.
talking about
Yeah.
it, I can draw those connections. But when it comes to like the user, there's a very big gap in the true crime community of like how people are in that lifestyle. And there's different types of users. There's the functional addict, which acts very different, does things very differently from
Yeah.
your gutter junkie, that does things very different. But one thing that is so insane, like I can't even explain to you guys how insane it is that Bryan started with needle use. That is so uncommon. Like, out of 1,000 drug addicts, you would be lucky to find one
I don't think
out of
that's accurate.
yeah, that's what we talked about, was the fact that in a couple weeks or a couple months, he went from just using to using needles.
Yeah, so
That
I
is so rare. You'll be lucky to find one person who does that out of 1,000 drug
no, it
addicts.
it does seem like he went to needle use very fast. It does seem that way. But I believe he started with pills. He had some kind of surgery that had to do with his weight loss. And I've heard it speculated that maybe he was, because he had
The
surgery, and
addiction was before
this
that,
is
I
this
thought.
is right before. No, the addiction came after the weight loss.
Are we sure?
So I'm pretty positive. I can go back and really dig into it again because it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it was weight loss, surgery, and then he became an addict. So my assumption is it is speculation. There's speculation there. But my assumption is that he started with pills. I don't, dude, I've never heard of an addict starting with a needle.
Okay, but
Unless
so it
that's
where I'm going, so I don't lose my point here, because it doesn't change anything. Okay, so
okay, okay.
when it comes to users, it's stated by his friend that he was only using for a short time. One, that's super rare too. Okay, so whatever kind of user he was so uncommon. It is so rare to have somebody that uses heroin, of all things, for a short time,
Right.
and a needle user. Like, the you're talking such a low percentage, you guys. Like, the likelihood of people that use heroin intravenal, and just stopping, is an absurdly low percentage. I was saying one out of 1,000 for that. Now, when it comes to people that were intravenous heroin use, you're probably talking one out of every million people stop their first time like that. Like, it is such an uncommon story. It is so uncommon to be an addict for that short amount of time, like a year. And whether it was a couple weeks or a month, he pretty much started with a needle. Okay, when I have my experience of people that I've known in that industry and users and everything, most of them do not go to needles until there is a tolerance reasoning to go to needles. Normally, one of two things happens: either they can't find their drug of choice, which is prescription pills, they don't have enough money, anymore for those pills because pills are more expensive, or they have a friend who's willing to shoot them up the first time, and they notice the difference in the two. So his whole story around that is so rare and so uncommon that it just doesn't make sense. And where I'm going with that, where I was going, is that his progression, his escalation in that was so severe. It literally went from 1 to 100, just like bam, full escalation as far as you can go. You can't go any further than needle heroin, so
Right.
to see these behaviors, these risky behaviors at such a young age, before the age of 18, and then to have such a significant gap of nothing,
Right.
in my opinion, it what it looks like to me is you have somebody that was going through something, and it really seems like and feels like it was going through puberty, gaining weight, dropping confidence, and trying to do things to fix that. And we saw a couple things happen. Maybe he had a surgery. He definitely lost a ton of weight, and he was doing things to lose weight, like physical activities and classes and things that were physically active to lose that. And he used drugs in that general time span between 15 and 18 or whatever. So to see somebody come through the other side of that madness, depression, whatever was going on in his life, and have absolutely no escalation and no progression of criminal activities, of continued drug use, of continued theft, of any of these risky behaviors, sex related or other, and then to do something like this.
Yeah, it's really, 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 really odd. It's really strange. I don't understand it. I can't wrap my head around it. I do question though if his um addiction started with food. Um and then once he lost the weight, he changed addictions and then he was put in a rehab. I mean, the worst we've heard about Bryan Kohberger doing prior to this crime is stealing his sister's phone and tickling somebody unconsensually. That is the worst we've heard about him.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that when I look at that situation, and his dad called the popo, which is so important in this
Oh
situation,
my
and only
gosh,
people
yes.
that have been around a lifestyle like this would understand that he does not have codependent parents. Therefore, the likelihood of addict of the nature versus nurture behavior continuing is very slim. Addicts are normally what's it called, self-deprecating or whatever, to a whole nother level when they have a family of codependents supporting them, right?
Yes.
Well, his dad, he stole a phone, okay, and his dad called the police. That when you're an addict and you're stealing, your family is target number one. When you
Right.
progress down the line, your family will have cut you off. You don't have any contacts. You're not allowed in their house anymore because they know you're going to take things. You don't have a key to the house anymore because when they're gone, they know you're going to take things. Like, you literally can't be trusted around anything. So that situation makes me feel like he is a very new addict to steal something like his sister's phone, something that is so obviously going to be noticed and be gone. And then his dad calls the police on him, which is what he should be doing and is the
Right.
opposite of codependency.
Right, because when you have addict children and you have parents who enable and they're like, well, I don't really want to call the cops on them and get them in trouble. They just continue to get away with these things because you're not putting any boundaries up. You're not holding them accountable, which could be what contributed to Brian's addiction being so short because he was held accountable. they didn't just enable him. They didn't just say, "It's okay, sweetie. I don't want to get you in trouble, but give me the phone back. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that." And then he never does it, and he just steals more stuff from them. And they go in this endless cycle. That didn't happen. He held him
Yeah.
accountable.
Bring the
So
phone back and promise to quit drugs, and then we'll never have to talk about it again. Like, yeah, I agree with you.
right. So them holding him accountable probably did absolutely save his life, and it's probably why his addiction didn't last so long, but with him being overweight, and it makes me wonder, did he have some kind of addiction that just wasn't of drugs till he got older, and then, you know, his family held him accountable, and it stopped, and he turned everything around.
That's what I'm getting at here is like I understand I'm going kind of hard on like the behavioral traits and factors of this situation, but it's only to explain the differences in some of the lived experiences I've seen out there in the world by being in that general lifestyle of people who have been severely addicted and natural born addicts and alcoholics. And his situation is not that. So it doesn't read to me that it is an escalation of bad behaviors of which could eventually turn into a mass murder or serial killer. And what's interesting is he was going through something, right? And the story actually sounds like a normal American story, right? We read the statistics on how many people are addicts, and it's getting close to like 40%. It was 30 something percent. I think you said 36. I could be wrong, but 36% of people in the US are addicts and or alcoholics. Now, what's interesting is 50% of people in the Greek life in college, 50% of men, I'm sorry, not Greek life, 50% of men that are in the Greek life in fraternities leave college an addict or an alcoholic. But with going back to Bryan, he feels like a normal American story where you have a kid who was overweight at least 36% of a potential normal American story. He was overweight and unconfident, went through puberty, which is already super scary for a guy, makes you feel self-conscious about everything. Your voice is cracking. You feel like
Yeah.
you sound like a dummy. You don't know what's going on with your body. You're having all these desires that you can't even you literally can't control. You know, they're jumping out of you like you've never even felt before. And you're just not confident. You're not confident in your own skin. And he's overweight on top of it. And he starts wanting to change it and wanting to do things. And he's proactive in changing it, not wants to change it but does nothing. He's proactive in changing it, gets in classes, starts working out, starts doing all these things, has maybe a surgery, I don't know. And he drops it, dude. He loses the weight. He's still a teenager when he loses all that weight. Now, in that situation, if he had a surgery, maybe he got a taste of dope and he built an addiction, a physical addiction from there. And maybe he wasn't a mental addict, but was a physical addict. And that's why that story doesn't make sense. I don't know. But in a very short time, he progresses to needle use. According to people, we have no confirmation of that, but according to people close to him that were actual friends of his, say that he was using needles and had blood spots on his shirt, which is common, overcomes that before he hits 18, starts going to school and turning his life around and doing positive things in his life, and then goes for his doctorate degree, doesn't get another charge other than like basic pullovers and traffic tickets. He doesn't get caught up in weird peeping Tom situations or all these other things. Like 10 years is a long time to go of escalating from the extreme behaviors we see from 15 to 18 and never get caught up with
Yeah,
nothing.
I agree with you. It is a very long time. And, like I said, the worst we heard of in his addict days, which we don't know if there's records sealed from when he was a child that nobody can access yet. I don't know. But the worst we've heard is him stealing a phone in his addiction. And that's literally it. And he went to rehab and it worked. And you guys, the relapse rates are between 40 to 60%. It's literally a coin toss of people who will relapse when they go into rehab. And I'm sure those stats change.
Whoa, that's super low. I
It
thought
is.
relapse rates
I
were
don't I don't feel like
higher.
that's I do not feel like that's accurate. I don't. I think there's an issue with that statistics and, the way they conducted gathering that data, because in my personal experience, it's way higher than that. Like,
Yeah, and
way
I'm
higher.
glad I'm glad you said that, CH2. So CH had said that that was the drug of choice in the area, but I just want to expand on that because so around that time we were in Iraq, all right? And for those of you that don't know, that part of the world is where our opiates come from, is where our heroin comes from. For an entire gram of some of the most pure heroin in the world, it's like a couple American dollars, dude. If you guys haven't seen the documentaries of the dope kids or whatever, where you have these like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year old kids over on the streets in Iraq that literally use intravenous drugs. It's scary. It is so sad. But during that time when we were over there, our country was flooded with heroin. Absolutely and totally flooded with heroin. Some of the cheapest heroin prices you have ever seen in the entire history of the US. And it's because, the opportunity was there. I'm not going to say specifically people were doing this, but the opportunity was there. There was direct connections in the hundreds of thousands of people from the US that were over there. That creates a ton of opportunity. So a lot of H was coming over here and it was so insanely cheap. And that also was simultaneously when the boom of OxyContin was going on, not it, it OxyContin, the scary kind, not oxycodone, which is out now, two separate things. But then there was a starvation of that market, and we had an overabundance of heroin here, and that makes complete sense why something could happen like that, in his story.
Yeah, so CH found a different statistic and I want to put it up because I feel like that's important. I didn't find that when I googled it, but I feel like that's way more accurate. A way more accurate statistic is 85%. That's
Betty Ford,
realistic.
you can't trust
Um
Betty Ford.
but really?
No, you can't trust Betty Ford. No
Why do you say
way.
that?
So Betty Ford is the recovery center for Hollywood. I think I've told you about this before, that I've gone out there when I was doing all that work that I won't get into it, but so it's in the California area, and that's where all the Hollywood people go when they're trying to recover from like dope, sex, anything. And all it is a day spa the entire day. So the statistics around what your average American citizen would be and the statistics that they're receiving in there, it's much, much, much different because they're only intaking people that are not supported by insurance and can afford dropping $100,000 for 90 days.
Yeah, but I think it's important. We need to look at how they gathered those stats. They may not have just gathered them from Hollywood people. They may have gathered them in other ways. And I don't feel like this 40 to 60 is accurate. I really don't. And I found it on multiple websites. 85% seems much more likely to me. Uh, eh, you know, it just does. It seems way more likely.
Yeah, but my explanation paired with that percentage could be a reason.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So,
Um,
because wherever they're getting their data from, it could be a flawed data set because the people that are rich and can say, "Oh, I need to get clean again because I have a movie coming up. Let me throw down this $100,000 and go to Betty Ford where I get to be in a steam room all day and get massages all day and where whatever they stick those needles in you, all that stuff, whatever. That's a very different statistic than your average American citizen that is going through rehab and dealing with the stresses of daily life
Yeah.
from insurance.
Yeah, but that 85% was from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Betty Ford said 65%. The 85% is from the National Institute.
Yeah.
Okay. I just making sure that that was clear.
What? So you realize I'm talking about Betty Ford having a smaller stat because they have a flawed statistic, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't be the American statistic. If you have an overabundance of income and the ability to continue paying for your rehab and recovery, you have a much higher likelihood of not relapsing.
Yeah.
Therefore, that statistic would be lower.
Sure, for sure. Definitely. Yep, definitely. So, I just, I'm not really sure. I feel like what doesn't fit for me is, for one, we don't see Bryan we haven't heard, at least, of any significant trauma in his childhood. We don't see or have any evidence of him having a complicated or bad relationship with either of his parents, which is a pretty big deal. It seems like he has a supportive family. He had a good family that stayed together. They never divorced. We also see that his father held him accountable when he did something wrong. When he was an addict, he went to rehab, he got better. There wasn't this long extended time of him being an addict and, committing crimes and escalating. If we saw Bryan Kohberger was an addict for, like, 5 years, and he got in a bunch of trouble during that time, then I would be like, that's interesting. Like, what did he do? Like, what kind of trouble? Like, was he burglarizing places? Like, looking at those charges, looking at things that he's been arrested for, like, that would be something interesting to dig into, to see if there is a pattern of escalation there. But we don't see any of that. We see somebody who turned their life around and went for their, PhD in criminology, which is, it's very interesting. Like, I don't understand how he fits. I don't
I
understand
agree.
what could lead to this snap and doing this to these women and Ethan, that he has no connection to at all.
He would be the uncommon statistic of uncommon statistics. It would be a very, 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 very rare situation.
Yeah.
Because and here's another example, because so a lot of killers out there, and I'll just use what's his face? I'm having an ADHD moment right now. Hang on. Drawing a blank. Who did we just compare Bryan Kohberger against because of, like, mainstream media? A serial killer.
Danny Rolling,
No.
Elliot Rogers,
No. Who Danny Rolling looked up to.
Ted Bundy?
Yeah, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy.
You couldn't think of Ted Bundy?
Yeah, so that's just ADHD brain. I can't help it, you guys.
I
So
know.
I'll even forget the basic words like the or my name. I can't help what my brain doesn't let me remember with my ADHD. But yes, it is obvious. So with Bundy, okay, so a lot of people look at Bundy and they'll say, well, he went on for a long time without being caught. And that's not true for any of them, including Gacy as well. So they went on for a long time without being held accountable. They did not go on for a long time without being caught. They were just doubted for being so bad. Like the cops didn't see them as possibly being that bad. They let them go over and over and over again, like that other guy too that had the heavyset dude that focused on kids and smothering. I forget his
Bar
name right.
Jonah. Bar Jonah.
Bar Jonah, him too. So these guys did get caught. And once they realized they were serial killers, then they looked back at their history and they were like, oh my gosh, now this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. And they see the whole escalation and progression and who knows how many victims. With Bryan, he is in that stage right now where these guys would have been arrested and they should be able to look back. Okay, we can use a different example because some people don't think that this could be a serial killer. So, looking what's a mass like one of the shootings, okay, even when those situations, they very rarely come out of that alive, but they do sometimes. Usually the ones that run away from the scene are the ones that stay alive. But looking at like the most famous one, right, Columbine, once that was over, they were able to look back and see points on a linear chart of what made sense in the progression and escalation up until that crime. With Bryan Kohberger, we don't seem to have that.
No, and people try to, put things in there like, well, for instance, he was having issues at school. A professor was out to get him, didn't like him, thought Bryan was, doing things that were wrong, was trying to get him removed as a TA.
That's just
He
everyday
didn't
life,
he
though.
he didn't get
That's not
his,
out of
you
the
know,
ordinary.
he got rejected by the police department, like, all of these things, and they're saying, and then, only like a couple months later, he commits this crime. Like, clearly everything was going wrong in his life, so he snapped and committed this crime.
No, I understand. I understand some of the storylines out there, but like not getting a job is just another day in the like there's I this one time I didn't get a job, right? And there's been one time where I didn't get a job. Every other job I've gotten, it was what was it again? Oh, President of the United States. So I didn't get that job. No, but really that could just be connected to any other everyday situation. And I
Yeah,
don't
no, I
think
agree.
that adding that he didn't get a job and he was having everyday issues with people around him would bypass the possibility of seeing these escalating factors in his life.
Yeah, I don't think none of those things sound like enough to me to make somebody snap. I just I don't know.
They don't even sound problematic to me.
I mean, I guess it could be problematic if you moved out there to do these specific things and none of it's working out. That could be frustrating. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it's such a, like, at the age he's at, it doesn't seem like such a life ending thing where you feel like, "Oh, my life is over. I didn't get into the Pullman police." Like, it's not like the Pullman police are this, like, amazing it's not some prestigious job.
No, 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 it's not, and actually, I've looked into this before, and I don't remember why I did. I think this one time I did a report in school on polygraphs, and the success around them because it had something to do with, like, statistical evidence or probability or something like that, and I used polygraphs, and one of the statistics I came upon is the amount of people that don't get hired for law enforcement jobs their first application. And the statistic was super high, which would mean that that would be even less likely of a probability or reason to snap.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
and if it was one of those things, then it would be targeted to people that caused that.
Right, right. Not just randos that you don't know and have no connection to, that have nothing to do with even your university that you're having issues at. They have no connection to it. They're in a different city at a different university. So it seems really strange that if you are having issues at work and at school, that you would snap and kill random people instead of targeting, because if you want to go down the path of, well, this could be a mass murder thing, not a serial killer thing. It could be like somebody who snapped and just wanted to kill a lot of people, which normally mass enders are also doing it to end themselves.
Yeah,
Also.
not always, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's more often than not, it
That's
seems.
definitely different than serial killers who
Right.
do not want to die. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem to fit. And I have heard people argue many times that he did not lose his job until after he was arrested. And honestly, I can't recall. I've seen content creators bring it up and show some kind of receipts. I can't recall what I can't recall if that actually proved, like, for certain that he didn't lose his job until after he was arrested. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Do you remember?
I don't, but that's probably not something that I would focus on either because I just don't see a lot of value in that. Because I know that people want to assign like a ton of worth to these things. Oh my gosh, he didn't get the job. He was losing his mind or whatever. Dude, that happens all the time. It's just another day, you know? And I just don't think I would remember those details because I don't think I would put a lot of worth into that.
Okay, so there's an official statement by the university. Thank you, Miss Kelly. Appreciate that. I'll have to go back and look at it. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that it's even needs to be a focal point because it doesn't seem like there's any worth there in proving he snapped somehow. And I think that whole idea of him snapping is contradictory to the idea of being a serial killer. Because I
Yeah.
don't feel like serial killers just snap. That's not how they work. This
No.
is intentional, this is planned, this is escalation, this is progression over time,
Yeah.
not just somebody snapping and just randomly becoming a serial killer. That's not really how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just have a hard time drawing any of the conclusions or connections that they are coming to with Bryan Kohberger. And one thing I just want to be very clear about is look, like there's going to be people who believe he's guilty that watch this and feel like we're trying to justify Bryan Kohberger's innocence and completely choosing to ignore the fact that we're just looking for objective connections in somebody's past and drawing a correlation to other evidence out there in history, which is very good comparison, for data. But that's not even what's important. We're trying to figure out the how. It could be a possibility, and if you guys have ideas, please help me understand how it could be a possibility. And we can look up some statistical data behind it to try and back that information because I just have a hard time. I'm having a hard time making the connections and seeing how it's possible. Okay, so another one is that I'm surprised they never tried to draw a connection to is the Florida hot yoga studio killer. He was I don't think he was like a self-proclaimed incel, but he was on incel forums and things like that. And he targeted that specific business because it was all women who were in there. And he went there and ended a bunch of women because they were women. And what's interesting in that situation is there is very, very, very clear escalation. And they were able to look back at some of his writings in these incel forums and talking about his hatred for women and the society that supports women in this way and looks up to women in this way. And he had tickets from outbursts in bars. He had complaints from business owners from him verbally abusing women and it was very linear and connected and escalating, like exactly what we're talking about. And if there's any connection that I could see, it would be a situation like that, right? Except we're missing all the escalating parts. We're missing all of the prequel, all of
Yeah.
it.
We're absolutely missing all of it. And something else I find really interesting is that in the beginning, like Kathy Mabbutt, for example, described this crime as personal. We had the mayor of the town saying that it seemed like a crime of passion. We had many people feeling like it was an inner circle thing, like this was personal, it was isolated, it was targeted, and they had to have knowledge of the layout of this home. That does not indicate somebody who is an outsider. None of that does. So it makes you wonder. And I know character analysis, which love her. She makes me think. That's what we're about here. We're all about the thoughts, but and thinking these things through and looking at evidence, objective evidence, and that's what we're about here. So she has some kind of expertise, and there's a reason her channel is called character analysis. I can't remember what her credentials are again, but she brought up that it can be personal even if there's no connection to the person. Do you agree with that? Like, I want to ponder that for a minute. Like,
Say
can
it.
it
Hold on.
appear,
I was
can
just
this, what?
Good. Say it one
Can
more time.
this say what?
What you just asked me.
So she said that it could be personal even if the person has no connection to the people, that it's personal for them based on their own, perspective on this and why they're doing it. Like maybe the reason they're doing it is personal for them.
I mean,
Even if they
that's
don't know the person. But yet we heard so many people describe this. Officials, Kathy Mabbutt, the mayor, saying this is a passion of crime. This is a crime of passion. This is personal. They had to know the layout of the home, all these things. And then you hear it's a total outsider who had no connection to them at all. And it's
yeah.
like, well, that's odd. Like, it doesn't seem to fit. Like, there's so many ways I feel like this puzzle isn't quite fitting. But it makes me wonder, like, do you agree that it could appear this personal and the person not have known them and it still be like, still have that? Like, do you agree with that analysis? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I just love this comment. Yeah, I think that there is I guess I'll start from the very beginning of your statement. So the fact that it could be personal without it being personal, I understand where she's coming from. Like, I get it. Um, I understand it could be personal to them, but that so she's taking a word. So okay, personal in that way can be used in two different definitions. Okay, so when you're an outsider from a third person perspective and you're looking into a situation and you're saying that that it must be personal, you're defining the word personal as they have a personal connection to the victim in the same way that a familial homicide happens, and that's unmistakable. Okay, but You could also say that that location or the idea of these types of women could be personal to the suspect. And both of those things are true. You're just using a different definition for the word personal. So, in my opinion, it doesn't really fit. But I understand her point. So yes, I think she's right that it could be personal to the suspect, but that doesn't make it a personal crime. The definition of a personal crime is different than how she's using it. How she's using it is in the same way that the example I just gave with the hot yoga studio incel dude, that hot yoga studio and the women inside of it were personal to him because he had such a deep-seated hatred for women. All of them in there were living to hurt him. So yeah, I mean that's personal. I get it, you know. Um I get what she's saying, but it's not personal in the way that you're classifying the homicide type.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it from that perspective with him. Like it was personal to him because he had such a hatred for the women. I mean, I get it. But I'm curious because the mayor said a crime of passion, and then you hear Mabbott say that it was personal to whoever this was. Which you're right, it could be personal that it's a deep seated hate for women or something. But I'm just curious why they described it that way. And a crime of passion does not indicate a serial killer who it's personal for them or a mass murderer that's personal to them because of their emotions about those type of people.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't indicate that. So it's just I don't know. It makes me because a lot of people feel like this case is an inner circle killing. Like a lot of people think that that is more likely than Bryan Kohberger. There's many who
Yeah,
feel that way
because
for for
it's
many reasons.
fitting. That's the only thing that fits when okay, so again, let's say you're an expert, okay, which I'm not. I am not an expert profiler. But let's say that that this crime, you didn't know anything about it. There was no suspect. There was no anything. There was no data. You knew absolutely nothing, and you were an expert profiler. This would be a pretty easy conclusion to draw. And they did it. Mainstream media did it. Everybody did it. All the experts coming out made this exact assumption. Before Bryan Kohberger was known as the guy, they were all saying that this had to be someone close to them. This had to be somebody with personal knowledge. This had to be somebody with intimate knowledge of this house. This had to be somebody with intimate knowledge
Yep,
of the people inside.
yep.
So, yeah, I think that looking at the crime itself, the suspect doesn't fit. It does not fit the MO.
Yeah, no essay in this case throws me off too. And CH mentioned, well, maybe Mabbott Minch is talking about the way it's personal with the close contact. The way they were killed is like very personal because
Yeah,
it's a knife. Which
it
sure,
could
that's a
be.
good point.
That's
That
another
could be it.
definition of
Yeah.
using the term personal, you know. I think that it could be used in a million different ways. You could be looking at it from the context of the crime, or you could be looking at it from a first person context of the suspect or the victims. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I just I wonder sometimes I wonder if that initial assumption about it being a passion of crime and being personal and somebody who knows them got that initial instinct that a lot of people had that the cops ended up overlooking it because of of the optics. Like the fact that we have so many serial killers, because normally cops don't want to go to serial killer. They don't. They don't want to go to an outsider who's a serial
Oh
killer.
yeah, that's been proven.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
don't want to do that.
There's too many financial hindrances for them to classify something as a serial killer. And that's really unfortunate. And that's part of the reason why there has never been any additional research into the smiley face killers, is because the 1970s and 1980s serial killers, those task forces like left an awful taste in police's mouth locally for every police department across the nation. So now they look at serial killer task force as like, an enemy. It's the enemy,
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into them not wanting to even go there with it being a serial killer. So, but it makes me wonder, are there factors there, like we've talked about the fraternity, okay? We've talked about the reasons it would not look good for it to be an insider or have some kind of connection to the school or a fraternity or anything like that, because it looks very, very bad and it could, cause financial issues. And also, it makes me wonder, because these are sorority kids, okay, fraternity and sorority kids, because it's a house full of them, because it's a knife, like, did that initial instinct end up getting overlooked because of those kinds of optics, and that we have many serial killers of the past that had it look similar to this? Like, if you're just
Mm,
looking at it, the optics of it, of those details of it being sorority on a college camp or near a college campus, being a knife and, so many people, it did they think, well, that sounds like Ted Bundy. That sounds like Danny Rolling. That sounds like, this person or that person. I don't know. I just wonder, what if Kohberger ends up being innocent. I feel like the logical next step is an insider, somebody close. So it just makes you wonder, like, if that were the actual truth of it, why did that get overlooked? Is it intentional or is it not intentional, and why?
yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to make sense of what's in my head, because I think about these things, and then when I try to talk about them, it's hard to talk about sometimes, try to put my thoughts into words.
That's funny because I'm the opposite. I can talk about anything all day long and I have absolutely no thought to it.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. It's my salesman training, I think.
Yeah, probably.
All those years of standing in front of a mirror selling to myself. But yeah, uh, I agree. I think there are very big questions here. And what I keep going back to is like what I said when we were watching the premiere is I understand we're talking about Bryan Kohberger a lot, but we're using Bryan Kohberger as the reference point to try and draw connections using evidence of other escalations with mass murders or serial killers. So it's not focused on him as the person. It doesn't matter one way or the other whether he's innocent or guilty. We just need to know if he's truly innocent or if he's truly guilty, and that's the goal here. Going back to looking into the investigation, I truly think that if we can figure out why the investigation feels funky and feels off, that would give you the all the evidence you need to understand the who, or who could be the suspect in this case. I think figuring out the why the investigation is messed up would answer all the questions.
I'm surprised to hear you say that. You always say the why doesn't matter.
But so we already have a lot of evidence of the case being messed up. So I wouldn't be saying this unless we didn't have an overwhelming amount of evidence proving that the case is messed up. So, like, I understand there's a lot of people out there that believe he's guilty, and they do not want to look at the investigation and do not want to look at the flawed data. And I understand that too. I understand it from their perspective, because we have nothing confirming that these are mistakes. The only confirmation is my background and expertise on a couple things, and the rest of them are scientific investigations and using objective data to compare and contrast, right? So everyone's conclusion will be a little bit different. So I understand why they don't see that as being evidence, but me personally, I know 100%. It's not maybe. There's flaws in this investigation. Things were done wrong, and things were said wrong, and they were presented wrong, and they connected dots wrong. And it is there right out in the open for people that have enough knowledge into some of these topics to see, And the best example is the triangulation data. That's the best example, right? It very clearly says in the PCA that Bryan Kohberger was triangulated, and we have a history of proof of him going to this location 12 times or 13 times before the crime, and then he was there at night. Okay, well, you can't triangulate him, so you don't know that.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like there needs to be way more proof if they're gonna try to sell this narrative that he was stalking them prior. Because if there's more proof, okay, if they can solidify with something more legitimate than these, cell phone pings that from what you've shown are impossible to be accurate, um, that builds that escalation we're talking about. That makes the narrative way more believable. And I think that's a lot of people who truly believe he's guilty, they can't get past that. Like, look, he was stalking them. There was a buildup. He was stalking them. He was
Yeah.
going there, like every week, like for a while, and looking at them. There's all these, and if that's true, if they can really solidify that, then that will be a big factor in my mind of when I'm considering if I believe he's guilty or innocent. But if they can't nail that down any more than these horrible pings that can't be accurate, that are going to have a wide radius of error, a large margin for error, it proves nothing. It does nothing. It's meaningless.
Yeah,
And he should have been caught on camera all 12 of those times.
and I'm glad you said that, Jennifer, because that's something that we say all the time too. And then I'll go back to what you were saying. But yeah, I've said this from the very beginning. I hope Bryan Kohberger is truly guilty, because what it means for you, what it means for me, what it means for every single person in Idaho, is if he's not guilty, look at this situation from that perspective. Then who did it? And why are they not in jail? And why are we creating a fifth victim? And why are we continuing to put our citizens at risk? And why are we continuing to allow our police to be so poorly trained in execution, in investigative, executing their investigation efficiently? Why? That is a whole host of problems if he's not guilty.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if the PCA doesn't directly say triangulation. There's no way to get a location on somebody without triangulating towers. There's no way. You can't locate anybody using cell phone towers unless you're attempting to triangulate. So it just doesn't matter if they say that or not. The fact of the matter is there's not enough towers. That house is on the edge of the towers, which makes the margin for error so great. They can't do anything with those. And it is just an estimate with a wide margin of error. And, he could have been anywhere in that town. He could have been on the main strip, getting something to eat. And they're saying he's in the vicinity of the house stalking them. If they're using just that, they need way more than that. They need background app data, they need geolocation data. They need camera footage.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious what it drives me crazy. Because if that was real, what we should be seeing is that, on this date, Bryan Kohberger was within this area. At this time, he was at the cross street of this street and this. That would be an acceptable triangulation location information given, without having to get too micro of the amount of the radius of feet it's reliable down to, or anything like that. Is you can just give a cross street. Okay, so if you were at the cross street of the house, you give the date and you give the cross street, right? And that would be sufficient enough. But they don't do that, because they couldn't have that much. It couldn't be that pinpointed. So what they're probably seeing is that he was connected to one tower without having a backup tower connection and zero triangulation. So they're assuming, based on, I don't want to go into all of it, but if you look at a tower is triangular. They're always triangular, and they're triangle intentionally to create an octagon or a hexagon type pattern where one side will cover two sides of a hexagon, right? What's six? Is six hex? Six
I
sides? I think so.
I think so.
I could be wrong, though. I don't know.
No, I think you're right.
But if you look at the triangle, each side of this triangle here or down here will have a whole bunch of these white bars. It'll be like, so if this is one side, it'll be white bar, white bar, white bar, white bar, white bar, white bar. This white bar is pointed out this way. This one's pointed out this way. This one's pointed out this way because over here has a whole bunch of people it needs coverage. Then this one's pointed this way. This one's pointed this way. And this one's pointed that way. So you can tell what bar they're connected to. If you only have access to one tower, then really you could only connect it to one of those bars and then use the round trip time. And that is like not reliable. And what's interesting is, like, I didn't go this micro on the video, but it depends on what network they're using too. It depends on how reliable it is. So like if he had a phone that was connected to 5G, then it would be less reliable unless he was connected to, the low band of 5G, the 1.5 gigahertz or whatever, or the mid-range band or ultra capacity. All that comes into play. I just didn't go into that in the video, but
Yeah, it would probably get very meticulous.
yeah, I tried to keep it interesting on that video, because it can
Yeah,
get super sciencey and super boring.
for sure. Yeah,
So, but
definitely.
anyway,
So tomorrow is the live stream, the first live stream of a hearing in this case. I'm super curious how it's going to go. I'm super curious how, if the judge is going to give any kind of ruling or if he's going to take time to think on it, if they have a new point to argue about the grand jury. If they have anything to say about the IGG, if they're going to schedule a trial date.
I can do
Because
another
that's
video on it, Ashley. Sorry, I didn't go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, you should. You should. Um,
Well, really, I was just
if
trying to interrupt you and not let you finish.
yeah, I know, you love to do that. It's just you wait for the perfect moment every time.
What? It's
Every
because
time I talk,
it's
you
because I'm
just talk
abusive.
more. Yeah, I know. You really are. You really, really are.
But yeah, go ahead.
Um,
What do
but
you think about it?
think about what?
The hearing, what direction do you think it's going to go?
I mean, I think that he's gonna allow them the appeal. I don't think he's going to want to make a ruling on it. I think he will deny their request, to reconsider. I don't think he's gonna dismiss the indictment, but I think he is gonna allow them to appeal.
I don't think he's going to dismiss the indictment either. I don't think there's any way, shape, or form it's going to go that direction. And one reason is that something I have to take my hat off to Judge for is he has the way okay, this is not about how he's managed the case itself. But I think I've said this before multiple times. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I have. Um, Judge has intentionally been siding with the American people in this case.
Why do you think that?
Because when both sides didn't want cameras, the public was having a major issue and they wanted cameras, and he sided with the people and let the cameras in. And he's siding with the grand jury, which, even though the grand jury is super unfair, like really, really, really unfair, the grand jury is the American people. It is a jury of citizens, and citizens need to be protected in cases because obviously they're not on trial. And I think that part of his reasoning for not wanting to overturn the decision is the fact that the American people said this is what it is, regardless of however many issues there are within that system.
Hmm. I mean, I guess that's a good point, but I mean, I don't know. I guess that's a good point, but I guess I could see with the cameras him, siding with the public with that, and I think that was great. And I've heard they're going to be pointed face on, like head on with the lawyer, like the defense and the state's tables. We're not going to be looking at the back of everybody's heads. I really hope the audio's better. Like please, please let the audio be better. Please. 'Cause it's so hard to watch when the audio is as bad as it was. Um, but I don't know. I feel like Judge is a good judge. I think that he tries to be fair, but
Yeah, I
again,
agree.
I just I don't know. I feel like at the same time, um, something about him just makes me feel like he's a bit of a doormat too, though.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know
we've
if he's
talked about
capable of
that.
putting his foot down, and yeah, we have talked about it in the past, but I do think he realizes that it's over his head. The argument that they're arguing is over his head and that it needs to go to an appeal, and I think that honestly everybody, within, like, at least the defense and the judge know that's where it's gonna go, like, and I think they knew that from the beginning, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Probably. probably. And yeah, I have the same concerns, and I mean it in the best way possible. I just think that based on what we've seen with the pretrial banter of back and forth, where it seems and feels like the prosecution, whether they knowingly are doing it or not, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't change that it's being done. But the prosecution is not giving over all the evidence. The defense believes there is more evidence. You have the prosecution who is arguing and putting down the defense
Yeah.
in a really crappy way, in a non good faith manner. It is totally bad faith. In the way that they're talking about and to the defense. And then you have the defense snapping back with actual objective evidence to prove what the prosecution is. You know what I'm talking about? That back and forth that we've seen now 2 or 3 times or whatever.
Yep.
You know, in that situation, I think Judge could be a little bit more harsh, but I think that the way that he's managed it has been intentional and on purpose, because it's pre-trial and he's wanting to get a feel of the layout and the land of the 2 sides and kind of see how it's going to go before he has to step up and put his foot down. But overall, I agree with you. I think personally, I think he is he's doing good things in this case. And I don't feel comfortable judging him like harshly or putting him down in any way, because I can't understand what his rulings are without seeing the evidence that he gets to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. And this thing with the IgG, even though it sucks that it's only part of it, like I feel like it should have been all. This is actually a really big step in the right direction, because no, other courts don't do this. Normally, they are denied. They don't get to see the IgG. Um, he set a precedent here, and he did the right one in sharing it with the defense, even if it wasn't all of it. I absolutely feel like it should be all of it. I feel like that precedent needs to be set, that in all court cases, when IgG is used, all of it should be available to be fact checked by the other side. I think it needs to be made discoverable, just like every other piece of evidence. But what he did is not normal. It's not normal. That's not how it's been handled in the past. They have not given the defense the IgG in the past. And he made the
I mean,
decision to do it.
if it's used against the defendant, you have to. You
Yeah, but
literally
the
have to.
prosecution wasn't planning on using it, and they never use it because they use the buccal swab with the original sample.
I
So because they're not even bringing up IgG in court, and they're not using that as
Yeah.
an argument against
Just
the defendant, they consider it not discoverable, and they will not share it normally.
Yeah, but that's probably against like your standard attorneys. I think if you had a private attorney, they absolutely would be able to see that. If anything is used to come to to get to the conclusion of the defendant, a good lawyer would be able to get that shared.
Yeah, and I really hope he unseals those documents too. Like, I think that will show me if he unseals those and it's not a problem, and it's like, "Oh yeah, let's unseal those." That's fine. Um,
He's not
I
unsealing the IgG details.
I'm not talking about the IgG. I'm talking about what Bryan Kohberger's defense asked to be unsealed, which was
Gotcha, got it.
about the
Yeah.
grand jury indictment. If he unseals those, I feel like it will say a lot.
Yeah.
His intentions will say a lot. Because I feel like that's fair to have it unsealed.
Yeah.
Yeah, our Wild Wild West video on IGG, if you guys haven't seen that, definitely go check it out, because even though IGG was initially used in cold cases, that's not how it's gonna be in the future. They'll still use it for cold cases, but it's gonna become something that is actively used to identify suspects in active cases, and not just crimes like this. It could be, matters of national security, terrorist type things. It could be, mass ending type things. It could be all sorts of things. All sorts of things. People making threats against other people's lives. It's the future. It truly is. If it doesn't get shut down somehow by, like, them determining it's against, like, an amendment, like it's unconstitutional, which I don't think will happen. But there's arguments. There are people making arguments like that. So,
Yep. Absolutely. But
yeah. That exactly, Mikey. It's their own sealing of emotion that they want lifted. There should be no reason to unseal it. They asked for it to be sealed.
Yep.
I agree.
But that is it for the show tonight.
And we'll be back Sunday, and by then the court hearing will have taken place. I think during the live streaming, I'm going to try to be on Discord and Twitter and stuff and talking to everybody while it's live streaming, so we can talk about what's going on. Do you have any ideas of, like, an interaction while it's live streaming, since we can't be live?
Sunday.
Sunday, we will talk about it on the stream. We're gonna go over all of it on the stream on Sunday for sure. But I really wanted to talk and chat with you guys during the live stream.
Okay.
So, yeah, anyway, I'm gonna try to be on Discord and stuff. So,
okay. Sounds good. Cause yeah, I don't have any ideas. One thing that we usually don't do is try and, like, beat other people to stories, because our strength is the mind and think tanking these concepts, ideas, news stories, what directions they're going, how they're going there, and then digging into the investigation. It is something we can do, but we've just invested a lot of time in the editing. So I don't know. I think whatever you come up with would be a good idea. Maybe you can do well, I won't put it on here, because otherwise it's just going to be another situation of keeping up with the Joneses, like everyone right now, I swear. I'll talk to you about it offline.
okay. All right.
So,
yeah, I know. I've been really busy this week, but anyway, did you have something else you were gonna say? You just got really quiet and awkward.
no, I'm just always awkward.
All right. We'll see you guys Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And remember, 9 p.m. to 11, maybe sometimes later. Right now, since Brendan's not here, we're stopping a little bit earlier because, we're both really busy this week. But Sunday, he will be back in the studio. This sign,
I'll find it real quick, you guys.
This sign will be fixed, which will make me very happy. I don't want to mess with it at all. It's too much of a pain. So, until then, guys. Or what are you trying to find, Brendan? Hello?
Yeah.
Well, Ashley, if you have Twitter. I'll be on Twitter too. So
They just wanted the Judge YouTube, which is a good idea. So I just had to search it real quick.
oh, okay.
If you know how to search it, you should be able to get it. Just make sure you guys click on that link. Make sure it actually takes it to the correct channel, and it's not a fraud, because I remember when this channel first popped up, its tag was not at Judge John Judge. So I just, yeah, trying to make sure.
Okay.
All right, everybody, we appreciate all of you. Make sure you hop on all the podcast platforms. And really, I know I say this every time, but we get most of our views from the podcast platforms. So if you ever have a second and you can hop on one of them and give us a thumbs up and a star, it's going to be super awesome when we take the #1 spot in one of these countries that we're the top 5 in. And the differences in views right now, which YouTube will catch up. There's no way around it. No matter... I'm not even going down that road. But YouTube will catch up. You know, right now, YouTube to other podcast platforms, it's about 6-1. So however many views we're getting on YouTube, we're getting about 6 times that on the other podcast platforms. So that is a whole bunch of growth and brand building and helping us get to where we want to be. We are also top search on a lot of the search engines, popping up automatically. Like when you go to search something and that drop down comes down, we pop up in there a lot of times, which is really awesome. It part of it is caused by people who are actually trying to hold us back, but that's okay. But dude, I would be super happy if we were the #1 true crime show in Sudan. I would be happy anywhere. I think that's super cool. And it's all because of you guys. So I appreciate everything you guys do. If you get a second, hop on one of the podcast platforms other than YouTube, and stars, thumbs up, comment, and yeah, we appreciate all of you and all content creators out there. All of them are awesome. So just keep doing the do. And we'll
For
see you
sure.
next time.
Yes. Have a great weekend, guys. Take care of yourselves. See you Sunday night. Bye.